Perfect. Okay, hello and welcome to Altair's webinar on ESG and sustainability trends and requirements for the social housing sector. I just wanted to make a note that if you have any questions, please pop them into the chat and I will answer them at the end of the webinar. So my name is Bianca Hansen. I am a Principal Sustainability and ESG Consultant at Altair Consultancy and Advisory. My previous experience includes working with social care agencies, healthcare, education institutions, FMCG, and grassroots projects on ESG and sustainability consultancy work like ESG performance reviews, action plan development, and management, sustainability and impact reports, so both internal and external or public facing, carbon footprint assessments and decarbonization plans, and climate risk analysis and disclosures. I am now happily part of Altair's Sustainability and ESG team, where we support socially focused organizations with net zero transformation, creating access to ESG-backed funding, strategy development, climate-related risk management, research, insights, and guidance. At Altair, we have a range of experts in the fields of governance, consumer regulation, organizational transformation, sustainability, property development, property management, and sustainable finance. We have an unwavering commitment to our clients, and the sustainability and ESG team have taken it as our personal mission to demystify sustainability and ESG, to make it easier to gain a big picture view, benchmark performance, set targets, track impact, and embed sustainable practice within the organization. Because we know that sustainability is not a one-sided coin, it's multifaceted and requires a whole systems approach. So in the next 45 minutes, we'll develop a base understanding of what ESG and sustainability is. We will discuss who benefits from you as a housing association performing ESG due diligence. We will discuss the current and future regulatory landscape. I'll explain the ESG performance management cycle, which is an annual cycle, to help you understand the steps to take towards ESG excellence. I'll briefly explain the tool we've developed, which will make this easier for your organization. And lastly, we will highlight key takeaways and I'll answer any questions. But I don't want you to get overwhelmed. ESG does not have to be complicated. In fact, let's begin by making sure we've got the basics covered. So ESG stands for environment, social, and governance. ESG is like the report card for companies on how well they are doing in 3 specific areas. So E, how the organization impacts the planet. S, how it treats its people. G, how it is governed. You measure your ESG performance to identify what to prioritize in your ESG strategy. Sustainability is about the actions that need to be embedded within the organization to create that balance where people, planet, and profit can thrive together. We're here today because buildings are responsible for 20% of GHG emissions in the UK, with 67% of this from fuel combustion in residential buildings. The impact of ESG management on social value creation is also needed, as Earthwatch indicates that around 1 in 3 people in England don't have access to nature-rich spaces near their home, with no green space at all in some of the most deprived areas. Compliance, good governance, efficient supply chain, and risk management is critical to ensure sustainable action can be implemented. Investors and stakeholders also use ESG criteria to evaluate and compare organizations when choosing whether to invest, join, or collaborate with them. But the lack of ESG management has become a top risk to organizations in 2024. This has been highlighted by the social housing regulator's call to professionalize the sector. So the real question is, why is ESG important? For your tenants, the way you measure and improve your ESG performance is important. It affects their lives as ESG management results in awareness of their health and safety, placemaking, more integrated neighborhoods, access to clean transport, warm homes and lower energy bills, green energy contracts, better waste management, overall tenant satisfaction, which is aligned to the TSMs, etc. Ultimately, transparency about what and how you consider the social topics or well-being of your stakeholders will show your tenants that you care about them, your staff and the health of your assets and future operations. Community issues, which are considered in ESG, include the efficiency of communication and communication channels, the types and frequency of engagement between the organization and its relevant community champions, events or outreach, training provided, understanding the barriers and challenges which the community deals with, and matters of safety. For your staff who care about providing the best service in this critical sector, they need the relevant tools and safety to do this. There are a number of ESG topics which directly measure your consideration of your staff or human capital to support you in understanding where the gaps are and what you should be prioritizing in order to provide the best support to your staff, to provide services to your tenants, or simply to perform their role. Not only do you need to safeguard the health and safety of your tenants, but performing ESG due diligence on your assets is also necessary to make sure they are safeguarded to withstand current and future extreme weather. Contracts, grants, and loans are currently being awarded on the back of your sustainability performance. So how well does your organization perform, and how easy is this for you to talk about? Financial institutions, ESG and sustainability criteria is changing often, becoming more targeted and requiring organizations to have a comprehensive understanding of their overall ESG performance. Banks require lenders of sustainability-linked loans to already have an understanding of ESG from a holistic, big picture view and where their organization is currently positioned. They require you to actually set targets, collect key ESG metrics, and be able to report on your progress. You see, ESG is non-financial reporting, and this is a requirement that is not going away. In fact, sustainability-related requirements will continue to increase for organizations because whether we believe it or not, we need to protect ourselves, our stakeholders, and our assets from ESG-related risks. The only way to do this is to have a full understanding of how they affect us. Increasingly, organizations are requiring their suppliers to align to their sustainable procurement policies or strategies. Some suppliers are even requiring alignment of their customers to their responsible consumer policies. It's important to remember why the supply chain is a critical group. Suppliers have the power to influence your Scope 3 emissions. So it's in your best interest to work with and mitigate your supply chain associated emissions where possible. CBAM, for example, will likely increase the cost of a number of key materials to the sector. So it is encouraged to explore local alternatives where possible. We'll discuss CBAM a little bit later on. Navigating ESG performance in the sector is challenging due to tight budgets and competing challenges like fire safety post-Grenfell, consumer standards, net zero, the need to build more affordable homes and fast, while costs continue to increase, data access issues post-merger, and a shortage of skilled personnel. Accurate ESG reporting is critical, yet complex, affecting companies' ability to secure funding. Regulatory uncertainties add to this difficulty because evolving government policies create a moving target for compliance. I think we can all agree that the lack of a comprehensive and unified reporting framework leads to inconsistencies between this sector and others and hampers the ability to measure and compare ESG performance effectively. While the sustainability reporting landscape can seem daunting and complicated, it really doesn't have to be. So we've rounded up the most relevant global standards and frameworks in the UK. It's not necessary to go through each of them today. The ones we will focus on is IFRS S1. I'll just get the little pointer. This is IFRS S1 and IFRS S2 and the UK SDR. So IFRS S1 and S2 is the result of merging previous standards into one standard, which sets out the requirements for disclosure of sustainability-related financial information in S1, and as well as climate risk disclosures S2. This helps investors and stakeholders to benchmark and compare sustainability performance. It's due to be released July, so next month, 2024, and all public and private companies of any size can apply to IFRS S1, S2. It is voluntary. The UK SDR is the Sustainability Disclosure Requirements and the UK SRS Sustainability Reporting Standards is likely to be released this summer. So again, next month or August, and reporting will be required by Q1 of 2024 for the year of 2025 for the year of 2024. So mark your calendars with the following dates. Obviously, May 31st has passed now, but this is when the anti-greenwashing rules and guidance took effect. July 31st in 2024, so next month, firms can start to apply the labels alongside disclosures, so ESG labels. December, at the end of the year, the 2nd, naming and marketing rules take effect. So it would be good to start your ESG journey now if you haven't, in order to be able to make statements that are labeled correctly according to marketing rules in terms of greenwashing. The FCA's decision to introduce these rules reflect a growing demand for ESG-focused funds. It's the UK's first central sustainability reporting standard, with the core purpose of the SDRs to give deeper insights into an organization's environment and social impact, especially to investors. Importantly, the UK SDR is currently only applied to UK entities, including most types of asset management and distributors and the investment products they offer. So really, the main message here is that the confusion around which global standard or standards to align to is understandable. And there is a need for a framework which covers the areas within these standards without having to produce multiple reports. We'll make some suggestions on this a little later. Looking at the current and future landscape of regulation, policy, standards, and best practice, it's clear that the bulk of requirements appear in 2024 and 2025, most of these having come into play in 2023 and this very year. If we consider the UK's net zero goal alone, for the second time, the UK government's net zero strategy was deemed non-compliant by the UK High Court. Looking at the private sector and neighbouring countries who are ahead of decarbonisation measures, it's clear that the majority of the policies and regulation required for the UK to meet its net zero target are not currently in place or even consultation. Just to be clear, the items above the line are all regulation, policy, and standards or best practice, and below the line is consultations, either currently in play or are coming under consultation soon. If the sector does not adopt a forward-thinking approach to sustainability and plan for sustainability in practice, it will continue to struggle to meet the skill demand and the resources necessary to fund this transition. It's also important to recognize that with the upcoming elections, it's very likely that some environmental and social regulation may speed up in implementation, with certain requirements intensifying, like the ban on the sale of combustion vehicles moving from 2035 back to 2030, as an example. Let's discuss a number of the notable regulation standards or best practice in a little bit more detail. Starting with the FCA's long-awaited anti-greenwashing law, which came into force at the end of May this year. The rule is part of the wider Sustainability Disclosure Requirements regime, or UK SDR, and reflects the FCA's commitment to ESG and to supporting the government's commitment to achieving net zero by 2050. How? The rule requires organizations to ensure that any reference to the sustainability characteristics of a product or service is consistent with its true characteristics, and that the statement is fair, clear, and not misleading. So as an example, if an RP is claiming to have opened a low-carbon building, it should be clear what that means, with evidence to back this up. So far this year, a number of companies have been fined for greenwashing statements, like Barclays, VW, and other smaller organizations, fines up to 10% of the organization's annual revenue. While social impact organizations may be low on the CMA's radar right now, because the regulator for social housing has increased concerns on consumer standards, it won't be long before RPs become scrutinized. The UK CBAM will impose a carbon price or tax on the emissions embodied in relevant imports into the UK. It will cover specific products in 7 carbon-intensive sectors. So while it does aim to make sure embodied carbon of materials are distributed proportionally among the users, it also means that the cost of imported products will increase, which will increase the cost to build. The proposed Part Z mandates the measurement and reporting of whole life carbon emissions for all projects of 10 dwellings or more by 2026. And by 2028, there will be a legal limit on the upfront embodied carbon emissions of such projects. The UK GBC provides guidance on how to achieve net zero buildings, and the latest guidance is due to be published this year. While Decent Homes Standard 2 is due to enter consultation this year, it is likely to place a strong focus on climate risk, MEES, ventilation, and water efficiency. As part of the consumer standards, all social housing organizations will be required to comply. To support compliance, we recommend that organizations with physical assets perform climate risk scenario analysis in order to identify risks and add adaptation measures to retrofit and maintenance planning and costing. The benefits attached to this is ensuring your assets have a higher chance of withstanding intense weather changes, your tenants are protected, your reputation improves as you're seen proactively protecting your stakeholders, and your insurance premium goes down or remains low. The 2035 ICE ban. This is the law that bans the sales of new petrol or diesel vehicles in the UK by 2035 onward. The consequence for non-compliance may include fines and penalties for manufacturers and retailers who do not adhere to the law because it will be nationally enforced. Organizations have begun their fleet transition planning now, as the transition is sustainably executed if done over 3 to 7 years. Looking at gas boilers, the UK government has set out plans to phase out the installation of gas boilers as part of its commitment to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And this includes a ban on installation of gas boilers by 2025, where newly built homes will no longer be allowed to have gas boilers installed. So biodiversity net gain is now a legal requirement for all new planning applications and stipulates that any development must enhance biodiversity by at least 10% relative to the site's pre-development biodiversity value. This enhancement must be secured for at least 30 years. So in some places, I just wanted to mention, the BNG requirement is higher. For example, in Surrey, where planning permission will be denied if a BNG of 20% or higher is not proposed. The UK mandatory water efficiency labelling is an enabling policy for water companies and the building and construction sectors to help us achieve England's statutory water demand target and the non-statutory interim targets set under the Environmental Act. This is likely to launch in 2025. The consultation on the Supported Housing Act 2023 aims to gather the input on the proposed Supported Housing Act, which seeks to improve regulations and standards in supported housing, with the new regulations expected to be implemented in 2025. We also have the Competence and Conduct Standard, the Renters Reform Bill, Leasehold and Freehold Reform Act 2024, AWAB's Law, and the consumer satisfaction measures. Some of you might have completed a number of these steps. So now moving into the ESG annual cycle. So you might have executed or completed some of these steps in this order or in an ad hoc way. So what we've done to help you on your ESG journey is to map out the annual ESG cycle and highlight best practice. For time's sake, let's just focus on the first 2 steps. So step 1 is about understanding the reporting requirements and applicability. So explore the existing frameworks, but recognize when a framework is too narrow or not forward-looking enough to base your targeted action plan on. Explore the grants and private funding currently available, as well as the ESG-related requirements, as usually these will be forward-looking and will require a targeted approach. It's important to note that there is not currently one singular standard which helps the housing sector to do this. Then finally, Select the relevant standards to report on. Then step 2 is to baseline your ESG performance to gain a holistic view of your ESG health. So this ESG health check should incorporate all relevant themes, looking beyond current requirements to establish a clear understanding, current performance under environmental, social, and governance metrics and topics. It should include topics to measure the management of your supply chain, tenant satisfaction, building regulation compliance, climate resilience, etc. So a number of material ESG themes. This exercise should provide you with clear areas for improvement, areas of prioritization aligned with your desired eligibility for funding, high impact areas, quick wins, and a clear indication of best practice to assist you in understanding how ambitious your target setting is required to be. We'll focus on step 1 and step 2 for now, but if you would like to talk about steps 3 to 9, please do get in touch. Let's just run through the rest of them so that we can understand the full process. So after understanding the reporting requirements and applicability, you've baselined your ESG performance. You then need to consider strategic planning. Your target setting is step 4. Step 5 is the implementation and action planning. Step 6 is to perform monitoring and reporting. Step 7 is continuous improvement and adaptation, so reviewing throughout the year. Your communication strategy, both internally and externally. And lastly, to reassess annually, remembering that this is an annual process to reassess your performance and reassess your targets to set new ones. So let's look at step 1 in a little bit more detail. So we're going to bring up this diagram again, because as I mentioned earlier, there is an ocean of sustainability standards and frameworks, or as many people see them, acronyms. Most of these standards are voluntary, but best practice. So choose your material themes and align this to what is important to regulators, financiers, decarbonization, the long-term health of your assets, as well as your tenants. What we've done is created a comprehensive ESG framework which aligns to all the relevant standards. These standards include the Sustainable Development Goals, the Social Housing Sustainability Reporting Standard, the Principles for Responsible Investment, and the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures, the UK SDR, and IFRS S1 and S2. This means that you'd be covering all your bases, getting third-party assurance and validation on your performance, and you'll be able to pull out the information to report on any one of these frameworks, which I've mentioned, making your ESG reporting relevant, scalable, much simpler, cheaper, and pain-free. So thinking about step 2 in the ESG cycle, why should we baseline our ESG health? Well, understanding your performance should also unveil the gaps, and this will help you prioritize your focus for your sustainability or ESG strategy. And with that, save you time and help you allocate resource appropriately, as through step 2, you will gain an understanding of where your effort should be placed to prioritize tasks, streamline processes, and, as I said, optimize resource allocation. This ultimately increases productivity of your team, helps to assign ownership within the organization, and helps you to reach the intended targets. Learning about your current ESG performance should also provide evidence to support access to funding. And with that, it should become clear what to consider and integrate into new build design and your retrofit strategy to ensure alignment with green building design principles as well as your customer needs. UK regulators have supercharged the CMA in having the power to decide that an organization claims are misleading and fine you up to 10% of your annual revenue or turnover without the need to go to court. But because of the reputational benefits attached to baselining and managing your ESG performance, any sustainability or impact-related statements that the organization makes would and should be evidenced. Transparency on your ESG journey Provide your stakeholders with assurance that the organization is compliant, but also contributes to overall competitive positioning. A strong ESG record can also differentiate an organization as an employee of choice, attracting skilled employees who align with your values and your mission. So I hope our singular ESG framework does help to demystify and to simplify the annual ESG cycle and reporting. We have been developing an ESG health check that is a representative of current regulation, standards, and best practice, and is continuously updated with new regulation that comes up. It's the only ESG health check that is aligned to the sector, provides you with an accurate ESG baseline, helps you to set targets and bespoke actions, and provides evidence to support access to additional funding routes. So we identify the short-term urgent actions versus the longer-term measures. We help you embed sustainability across your organization, and we drive targeted actions to help you improve your ESG performance. If we look at the key takeaways, ESG is the measurement and management of your environmental, social, and governance performance, where sustainability is the action of implementation within the organization. Efficient ESG management should save you time and resource and embed a culture of sustainability within the organization. The main difficulties for social housing regarding ESG seem to be the current volatile legislative environment, benchmarking difficulties, and financial constraints. Organizations should try and move organizational mentality towards the 9 stages of the ESG cycle, and that this is an annual cycle. It's important to start somewhere. Map out what reporting requirements are applicable to you and start understanding your baseline. So start with that step 1 and step 2. Altair is trying to be part of the solution with the consolidation of key requirements into a singular framework to provide you with a holistic and future-proof perspective of your ESG health. It should help you identify key actions for improvement and ultimately help to alter the business as usual. So remember, if there's one thing that you can remember from this, is that the goal is to always start where you are and improve at a rate that aligns to your organization's capabilities. I want to thank you for joining me, and I also want to welcome any questions, which I'll now ask. Please, again, use the chat function to ask any questions. Just as a side note, we'll be having more webinars coming up, and I will send out a poll to understand appetite and what you're interested in learning about. So I'm going to stop sharing and answer some questions. So someone asked about EPC-C by 2030 or 2035. So EPC homes are supposed to reach EPC-C by 2035, but 2034, I think it was assisted living and affordable homes. The SRS, not the sector-specific reporting standard for all RPs. So the social housing SRS, yes, it is the first and only reporting, well, it was the first reporting standard, but it is a little bit narrow in terms of looking ahead. If we would like to plan ahead for the future, set targeted actions that plan for the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, it's important to look at a little bit of a wider reach of E topics, S topics, G topics, and how this can be integrated into the organization. Does anyone else have any questions? You're welcome to pop yourself off mute and ask away. Is there another question? There. Housing, Alan, thank you for your question. Housing associations are creaking under the weight of regulation, inflation, etc. If the funding for new issue initiatives is not to come out of tenants' rent, please suggest some of the sources of funding available. So I understand that there are financial constraints. It's very evident. One way that you are able to pay for the ESG initiatives and ESG consulting is through private finance, so ESG linked finance or sustainable loans, which will have a more favorable rate. I can share some of those potential funds with you. We can discuss that because there are a number that offer favorable rates. And so if you look at a typical loan of 3 years, 20 million pounds, then the savings that you would gain in terms of the favorable rate in the first and a half years, that would easily pay for a full ESG consultancy piece that sets out your ESG current position and set an targeted action plan. So there is funding available, or it is possible to fund that not directly out of your pocket. So the greenwashing risk, is this realistically going to impact the HA sector in the short or medium term? So if we look at greenwashing, anti-greenwashing, currently it just was launched a couple months ago, 3 months ago. They are obviously going to be targeting high impact sectors and industry first, and obviously companies. The social sector will be looked at eventually. This will probably be in the medium term, but in the meantime, it becomes very evident once people, your stakeholders, understand what greenwashing is and what to look out for, that if you're making a statement that is not substantiated or they can't find evidence to prove it, it is a reputational risk for your organization or any organization making such statements. I hope that answers your question. So I understand currently all ESG reporting is voluntary. Is that correct? That is correct. It is voluntary. Also, I'm guessing the recording will be shared. Yes, it will be. But if you could go over the relevant reporting frameworks again and why you should choose them, that would be great. Might have time for that. What I can do is that I will send this to you and I will add a little bit more information about the different reporting frameworks in the slides that we send you. We're a member of the SRS for social housing from the Good Economy and report only on those lines. So I'm going to still send us their own questionnaires through that required. Yeah. Is there any chance of a unified reporting standard? Is there any pressure on financial lenders to accept one single standard that we can all work towards? Okay, so I have been speaking to a number of different private financing institutions, and all agree that the sector kind of needs that next step. The sector has started looking at E, S, and G topics and collecting metrics, but it's not currently at the level it should be. If we're going to consider everything, we need to build on what is currently available. And that is what we've done in the framework that we've developed. So essentially, it is a very comprehensive framework. We've aligned the SRS, so the Sustainable Reporting Standard for Social Housing, that is encompassed within our framework. So if you still want to report on the SRS and submit that report to the Good Economy, you're still able to pull that information out of the framework, the measurement tool that we've created to report on that. But it also means that you're able to report on a number of other frameworks, which then satisfies your lender's requirements and will make these questionnaires that you have to fill out much easier. Are there any more questions? I'm also happy to record these questions and write out a more detailed response and send that out to everyone if that would be useful for you. to refer back to. Perfect. If there are no more questions, I just want to thank you again for joining me. Very excited to be part of this sector. I feel that there is a lot that we can do together, and there's a lot to kind of learn and get on board with. So I look forward to hopefully speaking to some of you in the future. And yes, you can expect the slides to be in your inbox, hopefully end of this week. Have a lovely day.